Welcome to Athletic Alert, sponsored by Michael Roseman Podiatry. Fantasy baseball seems far away, but it's drawing closer each day. So today, we go to Colin's top 10 first baseman.
That's right. Previously, we covered the catchers, which is probably the thinnest position in all of fantasy baseball. Whereas today, we'll be covering the first baseman, arguably the deepest position in fantasy baseball. These are Romaglia's rankings.
Colin, the first guy on your list, the guy that I love, Paul Goldschmidt, should have been the MVP, and I can't disagree with him being first. I think that's obvious this season.
Goldie's an absolute monster. I mean, last season hit 33 home runs, 110 RBIs, 21 stolen bases, and hit for a .321 average. Video game numbers, I'm telling you. And he has great support around him. The best table setter, I think, in the game in A.J. Pollock, who had almost 40 steals last season, so he can get on base for Goldschmidt. They help each other out. And, Goldschmidt has hit over 300 the past 3 seasons. So this is a guy who's super consistent, and this is a guy that arguably I would take as my first overall pick out of everyone. I mean, everyone talks about the big 3 this year. You got Goldschmidt, you got Harper, you got Trout. I love all 3 of them, but Trout's stolen base numbers are starting to come down, and Goldschmidt's stolen base numbers are starting to come up. I think this year is the year that Mike Trout is not the first overall pick in fantasy baseball. It's going to be Paulie G.
I think that most people would disagree with you on that, but I'm with you there. I mean, Paul Goldschmidt puts up insane numbers, especially as a first baseman. Now we move down the list, somebody with a different kind of skill set, Miguel Cabrera, number 2 on your list. I gotta agree with you there also. I mean, this guy may be the most consistent guy in the history of fantasy baseball. I mean, he puts up crazy good numbers every year.
And, I mean, you just look at his track record. I mean, he's 32, so he does have a long track record. He's only had 1 season in the past 11 where he hit under 300 for his average. And in the past 12 seasons, he's only hit under 100 RBIs once, and that was last season when he got injured.
That's dominance.
Dominance through the whole league. And last season, I know a lot of people were concerned it was the first time he went on the DL in his career. So this is a guy who stays healthy a lot. Don't be concerned about Miguel Cabrera. I'm telling all of you out there, do not be concerned about Miguel Cabrera. This is a guy who has shown every single season that he's one of the top players in this league. He's on a great offense in Detroit. They get things done, and Miguel Cabrera is just safe, a locked-in guy to get you 30 home runs, 100 RBIs. Cannot go wrong.
You cannot go wrong with Miguel Cabrera. And you move down to a younger guy, number 3, Anthony Rizzo. And he's kind of being considered the mini Paul Goldschmidt this season, but I feel like Paul Goldschmidt has a pretty big edge on him. He's got he batted like over 320 last season, Paul Goldschmidt, with Anthony Rizzo batting under 280, so at like 278. Right. So I feel like there's almost a 50-point difference in batting average, which is already a huge stat difference. And then you move to the the comparable numbers like RBIs and homers and stolen bases, and Goldschmidt beats him in all of them.
Right.
Even though it's by a little bit, they all add up, those little bits. And I think that Goldschmidt is really going to overtake what Rizzo's going to do this season. And Rizzo, I actually expect to go down maybe a little bit this year, maybe go down to 4 or 5 behind some of those guys. But I think you can rely on him to have a pretty good season.
Yeah, the reason I have him at 3 is just because of his similar skill set to Goldschmidt, in which he can produce categories across the board. He can give you good numbers in home runs, RBIs, stolen bases, and average. The only thing I have a concern with is those stolen bases, because last season, he hit 17 stolen bases. But if you look back at his previous seasons before then, he's never had a season where he's had over 6 stolen bases. So I think this is a result of Joe Madden coming in, because he's a guy who likes to take risks. So, you could argue, yeah, he is going to get over 10 stolen bases this year, Anthony Rizzo, but Is he really? We don't know. This is his first season.
But I feel like that's a stat that's always kind of like fluctuating between seasons. Even for guys that steal a lot of bases, they can get 50 and then 30 and then 40.
True.
Between seasons. And I feel like with Rizzo, I feel like Joe Madden was the big difference in that stat. And I feel like he will have over 10 stolen bases, but that's really just kind of like a guess. You really can't tell with stolen bases. It's hard.
It's tough. It really is. But one thing's for sure is that he's in a great lineup in Chicago, and he's just going to thrive.
Exactly. Anybody in Chicago lineup has an edge in fantasy because they're counting the stats are going up, runs and ribbies. Now we move down to number 4, Jose Abreu, about to go into his 3rd year in the league, and I really like this guy as a first baseman because he's one of the guys that's going to get you over a 300 average, but at the same time hitting over 30 homers.
Yes.
Even though Goldschmidt, Rizzo, a few of the guys on this list can steal bases, and that's something that Abreu's not going to do. I think the fact that he's probably going to be hitting over 300 with 30 homers is enough. And he's done that in his first 2 seasons. Who knows, he might improve, but even if he doesn't and stays at the same numbers that he's been at, I think he's proved that he can do that. And I don't think he's going down.
Right, and you can almost pair up the first 4 people to each other. You can say Rizzo's a tick down from Goldschmidt, and you can say Abreu's a tick down from Miggy.
Yeah, you can.
I mean, say that. You really could because Abreu's not going to get you stolen bases, but like you said, he'll get you those 30 home runs and over 100 ribbies. And that was the big thing for Abreu, for all fantasy owners, was last season. We were wondering, could he really duplicate that rookie season? Was he good enough to keep those numbers where they were? And he proved it last season. He is. So he deserves to be up there at number 4, and he also lies within a good lineup with the White Sox, also in Chicago. Both Chicago lineups have really high offenses this year. They're going to produce a ton of runs, so they're both great picks.
All right, so I'm moving down this list, and I see Joey Votto at number 6. And for me, he might even be in my top 3. I can argue him over Anthony Rizzo and Abreu, and even Edwin Encarnacion. Because I think it's just the way he goes to the plate. He's gonna bat and hit over 300, just like he does every year. He gets on base all the time. He's always like a top 10 candidate to be an on-base leader.
Right.
And he walks over 100 times a year while keeping his strikeouts low. I think that's really his best skill, being able to just go up to the plate and know exactly what he's doing. And I mean, he's got power. He's even got a little bit of speed in him. And I feel like he can be grouped up with the Goldschmidt and Rizzos of all the first basemen. I feel like he's in that top tier.
I mean, you could consider him in the top tier. The reason I don't have him in the top tier is a lot based on the team he plays on. Just because he plays for the Reds, and they don't have a powerful lineup. They have some speedsters, Billy Hamilton, and Brandon Phillips.
See, I like that though, that they're both in front of him, and the fact that he hits the ball almost every single time he goes up to the plate is an automatic RBI opportunity. Right,
and I agree with you. I mean, like you said, he's always a top 10 guy every year in on-base percentage. Always. Because he can draw over 100 walks. And he'll get you like probably 25 home runs. He can hit around 300. He's a very solid player. The problem I have is I just think his RBIs aren't going to be as elite as the first 4 guys, or the first 5 guys actually, and that's just because of the team he plays on, sadly.
Yeah.
But
I still think he's going to hold a lot of value.
Yeah. I wouldn't be disappointed with him on my team.
I would not be disappointed at all. Now, I'm going to move down a few, all the way to your 10th player, Chris Davis. Probably the hardest to decide what he's going to do out of anybody on this list.
Right.
Because he is so inconsistent.
Yes.
In 2013, the guy was hitting 280-something with over 50 homers.
Yeah.
Then you go to the next year, he played like 130 games, which is, enough games to have a good sample size.
Right.
But he hit like 20-something homers with a 190 average.
Right.
And then last season, he comes back and did what he did in 2013 and hits 40 homers and a 260-something average.
That's right.
You have no idea what he's going to do. And I don't want that in my first base position.
Yeah, that's the big question is, what are we going to get from Chris Davis? And that's the hardest thing to judge because your first base position, because it's so deep, you need to have one of those guys that you know is going to be solid. And you just don't know that with Chris Davis. Sure, he could end up being a top 3 third baseman. But you just don't know. This is a guy who every season nears 200 strikeouts. It's terrible plate discipline. I mean, he swings at everything. Now, if he makes contact, yeah, it goes out of the ballpark, but he's got to make that contact. And, this is a guy in 2013 who had 138 RBIs. So you're like, wow, this guy's amazing. And in 2013 through 2015, he had 126 home runs in 3 seasons. It's unbelievable, but since his average fluctuates so much, it's so tough to judge. Now, I like finally that he re-signed with Baltimore recently. That's going to help his value a lot because he stays within a smaller ballpark with a fairly good lineup. He's not moving to a bigger ballpark. But the reason I have him at 10 is because I think he's a bit of a risk just because of his strikeouts and his average.
He's definitely a risk, and I think the story of Chris Davis is basically, if you can get him early, don't do it.
Yeah.
If he's going late to you, you may as well take the chance on him, but only if it's a small risk. Because if you're taking this guy early as your first baseman, you're not going to have, if he doesn't do well, you're not going to do well.
Right, and we don't know yet because there's not a lot of mock drafts going on right now, but I promise you, I believe so, that Chris Davis is going to be a guy who will be taken ahead of a Prince Fielder or an Adrian Gonzalez because people are going to look at last season and go, wow, they were amazing. But I think Prince Fielder and Adrian Gonzalez, they're just safer guys to have in front of him. He might even get taken ahead of Edwin Encarnacion, and that's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Chris Davis does not deserve to be that high. Not at all. And
I think that he will fall in front of those safer guys, which you should not do when you're drafting. You should definitely draft him after the safe guys because he holds way too much risk.
Right.
So this was Colin's top 10 first baseman rankings. Mm-hmm. Stay tuned later for second base rankings, third base, every position in baseball, the fantasy baseball rankings from Colin. Thank you for watching. We will see you next time. Comment if you have any differing opinions from Colin. And subscribe to the channel. Like this if you want more. See you next time.